The morning my son brought Jessica into my life for the first time, I was down on my back under the kitchen sink, wrestling with a pipe that had been leaking for 2 days straight. My hands were covered in grease. My favorite flannel shirt had a rip down the back, and I heard the front door swing open somewhere above me. Michael called out, "Dad, we're here." I took my time, finished that joint clean, crawled out backwards, wiped my hands on an old rag, stood up. Jessica shook my hand. Her eyes moved across the room like she was taking inventory. The worn leather couch I'd bought in 2005. The television set that still worked even though the picture sometimes got a little fuzzy. The stack of library books stacked on the coffee table because I still liked reading real books, holding them in my hands. And she smiled. That kind of smile where you can see the moment someone makes up their mind about who you are. I smiled back. Didn't say much. That was 18 months ago. That handshake. That smile. That decision she'd made about me before she even knew my name. And here's the thing I've come to understand. If I'd corrected her right then and there, if I'd told her the truth about who I actually am, everything that followed would have gone in a completely different direction. Not for me, for her, for all of them. I'm Thomas Mackenzie. I'm 64 years old. I drive a 2010 pickup truck with a crack in the windshield I've been meaning to fix for 3 years now. Yeah, 3 years. Don't ask me why. I buy my jeans at Walmart because jeans are jeans and they all do the same job. I cut my own grass. I fix my own pipes. Every Tuesday morning without fail, I walk down to this little diner called Murphy's on Pine Street here in Denver, and I've been eating the exact same breakfast there for 20 years. 2 eggs over easy, wheat toast, black coffee. I'm telling you this because Jessica didn't know any of it. She didn't know that I own 8 residential properties scattered across this county. 8 properties, 31 rental units total. Every single one paid off, debt-free. And I'm not saying that to brag. I'm saying it because it matters to what happens next. Let me take you back to when this all started. When I was young, working double shifts at the factory, saving every penny I could squeeze out of my paycheck, my wife Catherine and I made a decision. We were going to build something real, something that would last. We bought the first property in 1987. Small renovation job. Put in the work ourselves on weekends. Sold it 3 years later for enough profit to buy 2 more. By the time Michael was in middle school, we had 4. Catherine and I, we never talked about it. We had an agreement early on. You don't wear what you have. You just have it. You don't broadcast it. You don't make it the centerpiece of who you are. Michael grew up knowing we were comfortable. He knew his parents had their things in order. But the specifics, he didn't know the specifics. I was waiting for the right moment, the right time to sit him down with all the documents spread out in front of us, to walk him through how it all came together, what it meant, what Catherine had wanted for his future. I was still waiting when Michael told me he and Jessica were engaged. I remember sitting in my truck in the driveway for a long time after that call ended. Just sitting there, holding the phone. Not because I didn't like Jessica. I barely knew her. But something Michael said. It stayed with me. He said, "She thinks it's really sweet, Dad. How simple you keep your life." He was laughing when he said it. He meant it as a compliment. He really did. And I thought about correcting him right then. I thought about saying, "Michael, let me tell you something about simple." But I didn't. I said, "That's kind of her." And I let it go. Now, I want to pause here for a second because this is where I made my first mistake. I had a moment of choice. I could have picked up that phone and told Michael everything right then. Told him that his life, his future, his security, it was already built, already waiting for him. But I didn't. I was curious, I think. I wanted to see what would happen if I stayed quiet. I wanted to understand what Jessica's real intentions were. And I know how that sounds. But when you've spent 40 years building something carefully, quietly, when you've learned to be protective of it, there's a part of you that goes into a kind of observer mode. You watch. You wait. You gather information. That's the thing about me that Catherine used to joke about. She'd say, "Tom, you're patient like a stone. Nothing moves you." She was right. I am patient. Maybe too patient. And sometimes patience. Sometimes it can turn into something else. Something a little bit like suspicion. Something a little bit like a test. The wedding was in October. Small, tasteful, up in the mountains at a venue with old oak trees and string lights that caught the sunset just right. I sat at the head table, gave a short toast, drank one glass of champagne, and that was it. Jessica looked beautiful. Michael looked happy in that way young men look happy when they think they've got everything figured out. Her parents were there. Her father, Marcus, commercial real estate developer based out of Fort Collins. Her mother, Susan, wearing enough jewelry to open a store. Susan asked me twice what I'd done for work before retiring. I told her the same thing both times. She nodded and moved on to someone more interesting. I watched Marcus that night. I watched how he worked the room, like a contractor surveying a job site, measuring, calculating, always looking for what could be improved, what could be acquired, what could be worth something. He and Jessica had the same eyes. I noticed that. Not bad eyes. Just eyes that never stopped working. And here's where my instincts started going off like alarms. I could feel it. The way Marcus looked at the house when we moved around it. The way his eyes lingered on certain things. The way he smiled but didn't quite mean it. I've seen that look before in negotiations, in conversations with people who are already 10 steps ahead, already calculating the angle. And I thought to myself, okay, this is interesting. This is worth paying attention to. The first 3 months after the wedding were quiet. Michael and Jessica settled into their apartment across town. They came for Sunday dinners every couple of weeks. Jessica was pleasant, asked about my health, complimented whatever I'd cooked, helped clear the table without being asked. I had no real complaints. Then one Sunday in January, Jessica asked me how long I'd lived in the house. I said 31 years. She said, "It must hold a lot of memories." I said it did. She said, almost casually, that the neighborhood had really come up in value over the past decade. Had I ever thought about downsizing? Something with less upkeep? Less to worry about? I looked at Michael. He was looking at his plate. I said the house suited me just fine. She smiled and said, Of course. She just wanted to make sure I was comfortable. That's how she said it. With so much warmth that if I hadn't been paying attention, I might have believed her. But I was paying attention. I've spent my whole life paying attention. That's how you don't lose things. 3 weeks later, Michael called on a Wednesday evening. Those calls, I'd come to recognize them the way you recognize a weather pattern. A cold front moving in. He said, "Dad, we've been talking." Those 4 words. We've been talking. That's how it starts. He said Jessica thought maybe I could use some help with my finances. Not that anything was wrong, he was quick to add. Just that managing things alone at my age could get complicated. He said Jessica's father knew a financial advisor, very reputable, someone who could help me think about tax strategy, estate planning, all of it. He said it would give them peace of mind. He said it with sincerity. I know my son, he meant it. But I also knew that Michael didn't come up with that idea on his own. I asked him whose peace of mind we were talking about. He laughed, a little uncomfortable. He said, "Dad, we just want to make sure you're taken care of." I told him I appreciated that. I said I would think about it. I hung up the phone and I called my attorney. His name is Howard. Howard and I have known each other for 16 years. We go to the same church. He updated my will 6 years ago. He knows every property I own, every trust arrangement, every document, every contingency. I told him what had been happening. I walked through it all. Howard listened. Then he said, "Thomas, do you want to move anything around? Do you want to change anything?" I said, "Not yet. I want to see what they're actually after first. I want to understand what we're dealing with." He said, "Okay, but call me when you need me." I told him to keep his calendar open. And you know what I want to say to everyone listening right now? This is the moment where a lot of men would panic. A lot of fathers would get defensive. They'd immediately suspect the worst. They'd cut off their son. They'd get angry and protective. But here's what I've learned. Sometimes the smartest thing you can do is absolutely nothing. Sometimes patience isn't weakness. It's strategy. It's power. You stay still. You stay quiet. You observe. You let people show you who they really are. And then you decide what to do about it. In February, Jessica started dropping by the house unannounced. Always with a reason. Returning a dish. Dropping off something Michael had left at their place. She'd come in and sit down and we'd talk. And eventually she'd steer the conversation somewhere specific. How did I handle the taxes on the house? Did I have a financial planner? Had I considered a reverse mortgage? She'd mention her father, how he'd helped a lot of elderly neighbors structure their assets more efficiently. She'd say the word efficiently, like it was a gift she was offering, a way out of some problem I didn't even know I had. I told her I kept things simple. She smiled every time I said that word, simple, like it was confirmation of something she'd suspected. Now, I want to be very clear about something because this matters. I wasn't cruel to Jessica. I didn't play games with her or pretend to be confused. I wasn't trying to catch her in some trap. I was just answering her questions honestly, directly, without volunteering anything beyond what she asked. I'm 64 years old. I'm not senile. I've been managing complex finances for longer than Jessica has been alive. But she had made a decision about who I was the moment she met me, and I saw no reason to update her file. Let her think what she thought. Eventually, the truth would come out. It always does. In March, she asked about the house directly, sat at my kitchen table with both hands wrapped around a coffee mug and said, "Thomas, I hope you don't mind me asking, do you own this house outright or is there still a mortgage?" I said there was no mortgage. Her fingers moved slightly on the mug. She asked when I'd paid it off. I said 2003. She said that was wonderful. She said a paid-off house in this neighborhood was worth serious money now. Did I know what comparable sales were running? I said I had a rough idea. She said her father's company had actually been very active in this area. She said if I ever wanted an informal valuation just to know where I stood, he would be happy to take a look. No pressure, no obligation. I thanked her. I said I would keep that in mind. After she left, I stood at the window and watched her get into her car. She sat there for a moment before she started the engine. I could see her on her phone, making a call. I didn't know who. I had a good guess. And I'll tell you something. In that moment, I felt this mixture of emotions that I still can't quite name. There was no anger. Not yet. There was something colder than anger. Something like acknowledgement. Like watching something you suspected confirmed in real time. April brought Michael to my door on a Saturday morning alone. He came in and sat at the kitchen table, and he had the look he used to get as a boy, when he was about to ask for something he already knew was complicated. He'd set his jaw a certain way. Look at the table instead of at me. I'd seen it 1,000 times growing up. He said Jessica had been doing some research. He said he hoped I would hear him out. I told him to go ahead. He said that from what Jessica had looked into, the property tax situation on a house this size could get difficult for someone on a fixed income. He said Jessica's father had suggested a structure where the house could be transferred into an LLC for tax purposes. He said it quickly. Nothing else changes. He said it would protect me. He said Jessica's father would co-sign on the LLC filing if I needed help setting it up. I looked at my son. I said, "Michael, who would own the LLC?" He looked at the table. He said it would be a joint structure, me and them together. I asked him to say that back to me slowly, to explain what that actually meant. He rubbed the back of his neck. He said it would be a way for the family to collectively manage the asset. He said Jessica's father did this kind of thing all the time. He said it was just smart planning. And I understood in that moment what was happening. I understood clearly. My own son, who I love more than anything in this world, had been brought into a scheme to take control of my property. Not through malice, through gentle suggestion, through the kind of convincing that happens in whispers late at night. Your father is old. He might need help. Let's protect him. I asked Michael directly. Was this his idea or Jessica's? He didn't answer right away. That was my answer. I told him I needed to think about it. I asked him to give me a couple of weeks. He seemed relieved to have a delay instead of a refusal. He hugged me before he left, and I held on to him a moment longer than usual because he was still my son and he was in over his head without knowing it. And that was my fault. I see that now. I should have told him everything years ago. That afternoon I called Howard. I said, "I'm ready. Let's start." And here's what happened next. Howard and I spent 3 evenings that week going through everything, every property, every deed, every piece of paperwork. He prepared documentation showing clear title on all 8 properties, every single one in a trust structure that Catherine and I had set up years ago. A structure that was already more tax efficient than anything Marcus could have dreamed up. and that named Michael as the sole beneficiary with ironclad language that no spouse could access or transfer without Michael's explicit consent and independent legal counsel. It was airtight. Catherine had insisted on it. She was brilliant about that kind of thing. Howard also wrote up a one-page summary document. Plain language, simple, just an overview of every asset I held, the address of each property, the approximate current market value, the trust structure, Michael's name as sole beneficiary, and at the bottom, Howard noted the combined estimated value, just under $2.4 million. Howard suggested I might want to share it at the right moment. I thanked him, and I put it in a folder in my desk drawer. I didn't open it again for weeks. I just knew it was there, like a card I wasn't ready to play yet. In May, Jessica asked if she could bring her father to meet me. I said, "Of course." Marcus arrived on a Saturday afternoon in a car that cost more than my first 4 properties combined. He was well-dressed, pleasant. He had the handshake of a man who practices it in a mirror. He admired the house, said it had good bones, said the lot was an exceptional size for this street. We sat in the living room, and Marcus talked for a while about market conditions. He talked about estate planning, generational wealth, tax efficiency. He was smooth, professional. Under different circumstances, I might have enjoyed the conversation. Then he unfolded a document on my coffee table. It was a draft LLC operating agreement. My name was listed as a founding member with a 40% interest. Jessica's name and Marcus's name together held 60%. The assets listed for contribution included this house, described as my primary residence. Marcus explained it carefully. He said this was purely protective. He said I would remain in the house for as long as I wanted. He said the LLC would simply allow the family to manage the asset together and avoid probate. He said it was what he would do for his own father. His voice was so reasonable, so trustworthy. I looked at the document for a moment. I asked Marcus what he knew about my financial situation. He said what Jessica had shared with him: a retired man, fixed income, a paid-off house. That was it. I nodded. I asked him if he had done any independent research. He said he hadn't felt it was necessary. And that's when I made my decision. That's when I understood that this moment, right here, was the moment I'd been waiting for. The moment when everything would shift. I stood up and I excused myself for a moment. I walked to my desk. I opened the drawer. I took out the folder. And I came back and sat down. I set the folder on the coffee table next to his LLC agreement. I told him I wanted to share something before we went any further. I opened the folder, and I slid the one-page summary across the table. Marcus picked it up. He read it. And his expression didn't collapse dramatically the way it might in a movie. It changed slowly. The way color drains from something. The way the light goes out of a room when someone closes the curtains. He looked up at me. He looked back down at the paper. Jessica, who was sitting next to Michael on the couch, leaned over to look. Michael leaned over too. The summary listed all 8 properties by address. It listed the approximate current market value of each one. It listed the trust structure. It listed Michael as sole beneficiary. At the bottom, Howard had noted the combined estimated value, just under $2.4 million. Nobody said anything for a moment. I picked up Marcus's LLC agreement and held it up. I told him I appreciated the work that had gone into it. I told him my attorney had reviewed something very similar 2 weeks ago. I told him the trust structure Catherine and I had set up in 2009 already accomplished everything his proposed agreement to accomplish, with better protections, better tax treatment, and no outside parties involved. I said I had been managing these assets for 37 years without difficulty, and I intended to continue doing so. I said Michael had always known he would inherit everything. I said that had never been in question. Marcus looked at me. He said quietly that he had not known. I said, "I understand. I had noticed." Jessica said nothing. She was looking at Michael. Michael was looking at the summary sheet. He turned it over as if there might be something on the back. He sat it down carefully. He looked at me. He said, "Dad." I said, "Son." He said, "She didn't know." I said, "I know." I said that was something I should have corrected sooner, and I was sorry for letting it go so long. I told him I had planned to sit down with him properly and walk through everything, and I had been postponing it. That was my mistake. That was on me. And here's what I want to say to anyone listening who's ever kept a secret from someone they love. Sometimes the silence that feels protective is actually the opposite. Sometimes it creates space for worse things to grow. If I'd told Michael years ago, none of this would have happened. None of it. He would have understood who his father actually is. He would have known that his inheritance wasn't something to be protected or negotiated. It was already his. Already waiting. And he wouldn't have been vulnerable to someone else's plan. Marcus folded his LLC agreement and put it back in his jacket. He stood up and said he thought we should give each other some time. He said it was a pleasure meeting me. He meant none of it, and we both knew it, and that was fine. He was a businessman. He had made a calculation, and the calculation had been wrong. I didn't hate him for it. I didn't feel triumphant either. I just felt tired. The way you feel when you've been patient for a long time, and patience finally pays off. But the cost is higher than you wanted to pay. Jessica stood too. She looked at me once before she turned toward the door. It wasn't anger exactly. It was the look of someone recalculating. Someone who realized midway through that they had misread the room entirely. I had seen that look before in negotiations, in conversations where the other person suddenly understands they're not as smart as they thought they were. Michael stayed. He sat at my kitchen table after they left, both hands flat on the surface. Not speaking. The late afternoon light came through the window the way it always does at that hour. That particular gold that Catherine used to talk about. She'd say it made the kitchen look like a painting, like a moment you could frame and keep forever. I made coffee. I set a cup in front of him. He said, "Dad, why didn't you tell me?" I said, I was asking myself the same thing. I said, part of it was old habit. Catherine and I kept things private for so long. It became second nature. Part of it was that I was waiting for you to be ready. And part of it, I admitted, was that when I saw how things were unfolding, I wanted to understand what I was dealing with before I showed my hand. Michael looked at his coffee cup. He said he felt like an idiot. I told him not to. I told him I had let it happen by staying quiet too long, and that was on me. I told him Jessica hadn't invented anything that wasn't already there because I had left a gap. People fill gaps. When you don't give them information, they'll create their own story. That's human nature. That's not Jessica's fault. That's my fault for letting the silence sit too long. He said he still should have asked. He said he should have pushed back when Jessica started steering things, and he hadn't. He said he knew why it had felt easier to let her handle it. He said he was ashamed of that. I told him shame was only useful if it led somewhere. I told him he could sit with that feeling and learn from it, or he could let it consume him. But I didn't think he had to let it destroy his marriage. He asked what I thought he should do now. I said that was between him and his wife. I said I had no opinion about his marriage. That wasn't my place to give. What I had was time. Time I should have used differently, and I intended to use it better going forward. I told him I wanted to sit down with him properly the way I had always planned to and walk through everything so he understood not just what existed but why and how it worked and what Catherine had wanted for him. His jaw tightened at Catherine's name. He always does that. A small thing he's done since he was 12 years old. Since the year she got sick the first time. He said he would like that. We sat at that kitchen table until it was dark outside. The sun dropped behind the mountains. The light shifted from gold to orange to purple. I went through everything. How it started, how it grew, what each property had cost, what it had taken to hold on to it in the lean years. I told him about the winter of 1994 when we nearly lost the third building because the boiler failed, and the insurance company disputed the claim, and I worked weekends for 4 months straight to cover the repairs. I was doing 2 jobs, coming home at midnight, getting up at 5. Catherine would have breakfast waiting and she'd say, "Eat, you need your strength," and I'd eat and go back out into the cold. I told him about the deal I almost made in 2001 that would have overextended us completely. We would have lost everything if the market had turned. And Catherine sat me down and said, "Tom, we are not doing this. This isn't smart, this is fear." And she was right. She was always right about that kind of thing. She could see 10 steps ahead. I told him about the trust, about Howard, about what Catherine's instructions had been. Specific instructions that Michael's inheritance would be protected no matter what happened, no matter who he married, no matter what came after. He listened to all of it. He didn't check his phone once. Near the end, he said, "She thought you were just a regular retired guy." I said, "I am." He said, "Dad, I mean it. I told him I drove the same truck I'd driven for 15 years because it ran fine and I liked it. I told him I bought my jeans at Walmart because jeans were jeans. I told him I fixed my own pipes because I knew how, and I liked knowing how. There was nothing about any of that that changed because of what was in a folder in my desk. The truck wasn't suddenly a different truck because there was money in the bank. The pipes weren't suddenly more complicated because I owned 8 properties. That's not humility. That's not false modesty. That's just who I am. He smiled a little. He said, "That's very you." I said I knew. He asked me one more thing before he left. He asked if I was angry. I thought about it. I said no. I said I had been watchful, and I had been careful, and maybe I had been a little bit satisfied at the end of it. Not in a mean way, but in the way you feel when a thing you built holds up under pressure and you get to see it hold. You get to see that all those years, all that work, all those early mornings, it mattered. I said the harder feeling was something I couldn't put a clean name on, something between regret and relief. The feeling of a man who let things drift a little too long and caught them just before they drifted out of reach. I said the most important thing was that he knew now, all of it, and that I should have told him years ago. That was my biggest mistake. Not the money, not keeping it quiet. It was keeping it quiet from him, from my own son. He hugged me at the door. He held on for a moment. I put my hand on the back of his head the way I did when he was small. After he left, I stood on the porch in the evening air. The neighborhood was quiet. The oak tree in the front yard that Catherine planted the year we moved in was coming into its spring leaves. I had been meaning to have the lower branches trimmed, and I kept forgetting. Some things don't change even when everything changes. I went inside and I called Howard. He picked up on the second ring. I told him it was done. He asked how it went. I said it went the way things go when you are patient enough to wait for the right moment, and you have spent 37 years making sure you have something worth waiting for. I said it wasn't perfect. It wasn't clean. But it was real. Howard laughed. He said Catherine would have loved this. I said I knew she would have. I said she would have had something specific and pointed to say about Marcus's jacket, the way it cost more than some people's houses, the way he wore it like it was supposed to prove something. Howard laughed again. He told me to get some rest. I locked up the house and turned off the downstairs lights. I walked through the kitchen where Michael and I had sat, where that gold evening light had come through the window that Catherine used to call her favorite thing about the whole house. I turned off that light last. I went upstairs. I set the folder on the nightstand on my side of the bed, the folder with the summary, the thing I'd been waiting to show him for months, the thing that changed everything just by existing. I slept the way I have learned to sleep over these years. Not perfectly, not without weight, but soundly. The sleep of a man who built something slowly and carefully and watched it hold. 3 weeks later, Michael came by on a Sunday morning alone. He came in and sat down and told me that he and Jessica had been doing a lot of talking. Real talking. The kind they probably should have been doing for a while. He said Jessica had admitted that her father had pushed the idea harder than she had let on. He said she was embarrassed. He said they were working through it. I could see it on his face, the weight of it, the work of it. I told him I was glad they were talking. Real conversation, the kind where you actually listen to the other person instead of just waiting for your turn to speak. That's how things get fixed. He said Jessica wanted to apologize to me in person. He asked if I was open to that. I said, of course I was. She was his wife, and that made her family, and I had not given up on family in 64 years, and I was not about to start now. He nodded. He looked at the table for a moment, and then he looked up. He said, Dad, thank you for not giving up on me either. I told him there was never a version of this where I gave up on him. Not ever. That was not something he needed to thank me for. That was just the job. That's what being a father is. It's showing up. It's staying when things get complicated. It's not keeping score. It's not using silence as a weapon or a punishment. It's just being there. He smiled. He said he knew. We had breakfast together that morning. I made the eggs the way he likes them, scrambled, not runny, and we ate at the kitchen table where 37 years of decisions had been made, where Catherine used to sit across from me with her coffee and her opinions and her stubbornness that I had loved more than I knew how to say, where the morning light came through the window and made everything look just for a moment like it was exactly enough, because it was. It had always been exactly enough. Now, I want to speak directly to everyone listening to this. If you're a parent watching your child go down a path you see trouble in, don't stay silent. Don't let pride or patience or cautiousness keep you from telling them what they need to know. Don't wait for the perfect moment. The perfect moment is now. It's when you're sitting across from someone you love and you have the chance to tell them the truth. If you're a child and your parent seems to be withholding important information about your future, about money, about inheritance, ask. Don't wait for them to volunteer it. Push. Say, I need to understand. Because silence creates space for other people to fill. And sometimes the people filling that space don't have your best interests at heart. If you're in a marriage and you're starting to sense that your spouse has a plan that doesn't include full transparency with their family, stop. Talk about it. Really talk about it. Because a marriage built on a scheme, even a small one, even a scheme dressed up as protection or help, is not a marriage, it's a transaction. And transactions fall apart. Here's what I wish I'd known earlier. Wealth isn't just about money. It's not about the properties or the rental units or the numbers on a piece of paper. Wealth is about the people who will carry it forward after you're gone. Wealth is about raising a child who understands that money is a tool, not a weapon. That it's built through work and discipline and patience. That it's something to be grateful for, not something to scheme over. The mistake I made wasn't in staying quiet. That was a strategy. The mistake was in staying quiet from the person who actually mattered. My son. If I'd brought him into my confidence years earlier, if I'd taught him how to think about money and assets and estate planning and the traps that can ensnare even smart people, none of the rest would have happened. Think about this. In your own life, where are you staying silent? Where are you waiting for the perfect moment that might never come? Is it about money? Is it about health? Is it about decisions that could affect the people you love? Don't make my mistake. Don't wait. And to anyone listening who has elderly parents, especially if those parents seem to be living simply, quietly, without a lot of fanfare, check on them, not to scheme against them. Check on them because they're your parents, and they deserve to know that you see them for who they really are, not for what you've decided they are based on first impressions. Really see them, really listen. If you're a parent worried that your child's spouse might be creating pressure around finances or assets, document everything. Get a good attorney. Don't wait until there's a problem. Build protection into your estate plan now. Give your child the gift of clarity. Give them the security of knowing that no matter what happens, no matter who they marry, they're protected. That's love. That's real protection. Here's what nobody tells you about getting older. The stakes get higher. Every decision matters more. And the people around you, they start to see you differently. Some of them see opportunity. Some of them see burden. Some of them see exactly who you are, and they love you for it. Your job is to make sure you know which is which, and the only way to do that is through honesty, through conversation, through refusing to let silence be a default strategy. I'm telling you this from the other side of a mistake. From the place where I finally got it right, but it took longer than it should have. From the place where my son knows who I am and what I've built and why it matters. And that knowledge, that changed everything. It changed him. It changed our relationship. It changed how he thinks about work and money and inheritance. It changed how he'll teach his own kids someday. Comment 1 if you think Thomas did the right thing. If you think he was justified in staying silent about his assets and then revealing everything at the perfect moment to expose Marcus's plan. Comment if you think his patience was justified. Comment 2 if you think Jessica deserves to be forgiven quickly. If you think families should move past financial schemes faster than they probably should. Comment if you believe in second chances, full and complete, without hesitation. Comment 3 if you've ever been in a situation like this. If you've ever watched someone you love get pulled into a scheme by an in-law. If you've ever had to stand by and watch it unfold before you could intervene, share your story. Comment below and tell me. What city are you watching from right now? What time is it where you are? I'm here in Denver and it's early morning and I'm thinking about all of you out there, listening to this story, and I'd love to know where you are. What time is it for you? Which state? Which country? I read every comment. I engage with as many as I can. This isn't me talking at you. This is a conversation. Tell me where you are. Tell me what time it is. Tell me if this story hit close to home. Disclaimer. This is a fictional story inspired by real situations that happen more often than people realize. but it's been completely rewritten by me here in Denver, Colorado, to avoid any reused content. Every detail has been changed. Every name, every location, every property and circumstance has been reimagined to protect privacy, while still telling the core story about family, money, trust, and what happens when silence becomes a liability instead of a strength. This is original storytelling, not recycled content. If you love this story, if it meant something to you, if you shared any piece of it with someone you know, please like this video. Please subscribe to this channel. Please turn on the notification bell so you don't miss the next story. I'm committed to bringing you original, thoughtful, carefully crafted storytelling about real human problems, real family dynamics, real moments where people have to choose between staying silent or speaking up, between protecting themselves or protecting the people they love, between the easy thing and the right thing.